Good evening, this is the Oscar Expert here with Brother Bro, and it's time for Sundance Top 10. We went to Sundance, we watched 26 movies, I think.
Some of them we reviewed, some of them we haven't. And now you get to see which ones we actually think are worth checking out. Honorable mentions, films that I think you should go see if you're interested, but they just didn't make the 10 because there's actually a lot of movies here I like a lot. Surprisingly not in here, Fair Play. I also want to mention Heroic, which is a Mexican film about military boot camp and the culture around it. I thought it was a really well-made, well-acted film. The direction and cinematography throughout were just pristine.
I like that movie a lot too, but I fell asleep during some of it, so it's not eligible for this list, but it might have made the top 10 if it did.
Another honorable mention, Talk to Me, which is a horror film that you'll probably want to check out. And I also really like Passages from Ira Sachs and Landscape with Invisible Hand. Pretty fun ride.
I'm just gonna say Theater Camp as an honorable mention, and then maybe Flora and Son. I also will give an honorable mention to Mutt. That's probably next in line for this list. It's about the day in the life of a trans man as he encounters people that he hasn't seen in like a year and a half since transitioning. Really well written, well acted, and I found it to be a very entertaining and insightful movie.
Now my number 10 is surprising even to me because I gave this a mixed out of 10, but I actually think it's well worth seeing, and I can't help but recommend it to people who I relay the Sundance films to. Magazine Dreams gets in the top 10. Jonathan Majors' performance is a real good reason to see this shit. It's definitely one of the best performances I think that will come across this year. There are scenes that were so cringe-inducing that, it provoked a really strong reaction from me. I think that's the reason this is here. This just provoked a very strong, visceral reaction. I was biting my nails. I was, almost like hiding my face. I didn't want to see what was going to happen next. It was like a train wreck in slow motion, like you can't look away. I had a really good time with it, and the last 40 minutes just kind of took me out of it. But still makes it worth seeing because the first half was like really damn good and very well made. Great cinematography, score.
My number 10 is The Starling Girl. This might not be the kind of movie that I'm thinking about in at the end of the year, but I felt really immersed in the drama, in this teenager's life in this Christian community. I thought what was really strong here was that the director doesn't cast judgment on any of the characters, and she observes lots of fine details within this story and what the characters are going through. Really great performances as well from Eliza Scanlon and Lewis Pullman.
My number 9 is The Deepest Breath, which is an A24 documentary. This film brings you into the world of freediving, and it does so in a very visceral way. This is also a really well-made, well-shot documentary with footage that I don't even know how they achieved it. You literally go with some of the divers from above the water all the way down 100 meters. I thought this was just as well assembled as like The Rescue and Free Solo, and it also did a really good job building the characters and making you care about the divers. It's a really engaging watch from start to finish, and I hope it gets nominated for an Oscar.
My number 9 is You Hurt My Feelings. Nicole Holofcener is just an excellent writer. Most of the conversations in this film are about very little ordinary things, but she finds a way to make these things so fascinating and relatable. All of the central characters are really well fleshed out and play an important part in the story. All the performances are great too. It was also just really consistently funny, and I found the humor to be very smart. It makes you think a little deeper about the ways in which we tell white lies to people we love, and especially regarding like the work that they create. And if you are somebody who creates things, then you will find something to relate to in this movie.
Number 8 is Theater Camp, which seems to be an audience favorite from Sundance this year. It's got a 3.8 Letterboxd. I mean, definitely one of the most popular films. It was interesting. I heard that maybe it's not everybody's sense of humor, and I expected going into it like maybe it was just a theater people thing. But one, I found myself understanding a lot of the seemingly inside jokes, and two, I thought this was a comedy that anybody would love. I thought it was hilarious. It's a pure for the laughs movie. I would really recommend taking some friends to see it and go to the theater if it comes out that way, or else you might just have to have a little party at your house because it's funner to laugh with your friends. So I think it can't be underestimated how excellent the editing was and how it just kept moving from joke to joke. There was really brilliant use of reaction shots that let the tension kind of come out and let you actually laugh. Many people are finding it to be very sweet as well and have a nice message about theater. So if that is specifically your thing and you're gonna like the movie, you're gonna like the movie. And I think it was a sweet movie also.
My number 8 is The Deepest Breath, which you already talked about. This was a really gripping documentary. It seems like the critics don't love this movie. And yeah, sure, it's not like the most experimental or groundbreaking thing, but Boy, this movie had my heart pumping. It is really intense. It is a hold your breath movie if there ever was one. And even though I felt like I was maybe only engaged on a surface visceral level, I feel like that's all the movie had to do because that is the subject, and the people in it do it for those thrills anyway. And I also found the movie to be like pretty moving, and I felt connected to the characters by the end of it. I was just really into it. I was very absorbed, and I do think that this could be an Oscar documentary. I feel like it's an easy recommendation. Like, I think anybody would like it, even though it seems some critics are mixed. I'm not really sure why you wouldn't like it. And it's also a little bit romantic too.
My number 7 is 20 Days in Mariupol. This is about the fall of Ukrainian city Mariupol in the ongoing Russian invasion. And it's all from one video journalist who's just going around and filming what he sees. It is basically distilled into the most gruesome, gut-wrenching parts of this struggle for basic survival. This isn't gonna make you feel good. It's basically a pure documentation about the events in Ukraine. I'd say it's really useful to supplement reading and headlines and watching the news with something like this that actually shows what people are going through. And unfortunately, this is not like, oh, Ukraine strikes back, but then Russia gets them, but then Ukraine strikes back. I mean, Mariupol didn't have a military presence, or so it seems, in the days before it completely fell and was destroyed. So this is a very bleak film, and you should be ready for that. It's gonna provoke some really strong reactions. Like, it was very hard to watch. And yeah, there's not much to say about it from a film criticism standpoint. It's just what it is.
It's hard to say that it's like a movie you like.
But I would recommend it. You know, it was one of the most impactful films, and it sort of broadens your view of like the human race.
Fair warning though, there are a lot of dead bodies and a lot of dead children like in this movie. So like, just know that if you are thinking about seeing it.
It's really, really upsetting.
My number 7 is Fair Play. I love a thriller with no guns. This film does a great job starting out with this grounded, seemingly happy relationship, and then things just start to slowly unravel, and it does a great job slowly building towards utter chaos. Alden Ehrenreich and Phoebe Dynevor both give amazing performances as the leads in this film, and they are a major reason to watch. Everything from the score, the sound design, the cinematography, the editing, like, it's all really solid, and I think that speaks to Chloe Dumont's skills as a filmmaker, and this is a really, really strong debut. This is also a very easy movie to recommend. Like, yeah, it's about a relationship disintegrating, but it's kind of fun in this weird way. Like, it's a delicious movie, and the way that it plays with gender dynamics I think is very insightful. Just an easy recommendation. Like, I think everybody should check it out when it's on Netflix.
Yeah, if you watch like 5 minutes, you'll just gobble up the rest. I don't know why it's actually not in my top 10. My number 6 is 1001. We went to the premiere public screening of this film, and people absolutely loved it, it seemed. This film took a while for me to get going and see if I was really into it, if I liked it. But once the son grows up, and you have him, the mother, and the father, and you see how all of them are kind of doing their best in the situation that they're in, I think it became really strong. It didn't feel like it was trying to pander to people who may not understand the experience. It was like, I'm just gonna put you in it and you're gonna see what's going on. We're gonna give you these really complicated people that are portrayed this way and that way in media, and we're gonna bring them to life and portray them with empathy, and you could tell people were just very moved. There's a couple knockout scenes at the end where the performances are just fantastic. The mother in this film, Teyana Taylor, is fucking incredible. It's one of the best performances I've seen this year, and it merits Oscar consideration, even though I don't predict that it will happen because this film just doesn't seem like it's being pushed in that direction. I think it's coming out in March.
I think she could get a little bit of hype though.
And the oldest son also has some amazing scenes. I mean, his acting was incredible. I think this is just a really good example of a filmmaker staying true to her voice and coming out with something where you feel like, oh, this is different. Like, people aren't telling the same story as this person is. Filmmaker is A.V. Rockwell. I really look forward to seeing what she does next. I think this is her debut feature film. You know, as much as I love Moonlight, it felt like this was a Moonlight that was not just trying to target the art house crowd, but was like kind of made for a general audience. You know, it doesn't have like dazzling cinematography, but I liked that it was made that way. I like that it wasn't trying to target the art house crowd. I respect it, and people should check it out.
My number 6 is Beyond Utopia. This movie follows this guy, Pastor Kim, who helps people escape North Korea. And you get a lot of footage in this documentary that like you will not find on the internet or anywhere else of North Korea. It's super immersive, super intense, really heartbreaking at times, but also like uplifting. And you follow these characters very closely on their journey. Like they have to travel like through China and like through other countries in order to be in the safe zone from being sent back to North Korea
and killed.
North Korea, I have not been a fan, but it is even more insane than I would have imagined before watching this documentary. But it's also fascinating to see how, because these people are subject to so much propaganda and censorship, they have no clue what the outside world is. The title is interesting, Beyond Utopia. Like, they think that this is just everything and this must be great. Some of the footage following these characters like through the woods in the dark is really, really intense and makes for like a thriller at times. I think this is the most acclaimed documentary out of Sundance, and I think it was my favorite documentary that I'd seen. I think this will be in contention for the Oscar next year, like no doubt.
I hope it wins. My number 5 is You Hurt My Feelings from Nicole Holofcener. I don't think you mentioned this, but it stars Julia Louis-Dreyfus in a role that I think is perfect for her, where she really knocks it out of the park. All the performances are great here. Very natural, very funny. I said in the review, she and Nicole Holofcener are just very in sync, and they work really well together. But what I loved about this movie was that it had some really honest writing. I like that it illuminates just a little piece of all of our lives that may feel small, may feel a little inconsequential. We probably even haven't examined it that closely, but in illuminating it, it feels like a little piece of my soul was healed. There's a lot that you could bring out of this film and into your real life, which is not something you can say about most films. And overall, it's just a very healing movie for me to watch. Very vulnerable, very human. I can see some people saying it's slight, but I don't think there's anything slight about what it's doing. It's a really breezy, easy to watch film, so I would definitely check this one out, especially if it's on streaming and it's like easy to watch. You don't need to go to the theater.
My number 5 is Fancy Dance. For the first 30 minutes, I was like, this is pretty good, but I think this is just going to be like another, good Sundance movie that's not amazing. But by the end, this movie kind of blew me away. It has very natural, lived-in performances, especially Lily Gladstone. I think her performance here is like really amazing. And the chemistry that she had with her niece, who's also great, was really strong. And the film did a great job grounding itself within that relationship. And this story is really just about these two trying to stay together, breaking some laws. But it organically becomes this larger story about all the problems that plague Native American reservations in, our modern day. And I feel like it actually ends up saying a lot. The last 30 minutes of the movie I thought was really intense. It almost made for a really good crime thriller. But it was that very end that really knocked my socks off. And I found myself in tears in a way that I didn't expect. I thought there were a lot of ways that this movie could just kind of fizzle out, but it really hits home a great ending that contains a whole range of emotions within itself. I hope this movie doesn't fall too under the radar this year. I suspect that it will, actually, but I think it really deserves your attention.
Well, my number 4 is Fancy Dance. I agree with everything you said. I think Lily Gladstone, again, I would love to see some awards consideration for this performance.
Well, you're going to get it for another movie, so don't worry.
She'll be in Killers of the Flower Moon, so. I agree that it was a film I had to stick with for about 25 minutes before it started picking up, and it became more of a thriller with a really strong heart at the center of it, and that heart just grows and grows throughout, and the tension builds, and the fate of the characters becomes more and more uncertain. It became very intense by the end. The very ending was such a knockout for me. It feels like it was incomplete and perfect at the same time, which is not something that many films can do very well. And I also was just a puddle of tears by the end, so I really hope people discover this one. It doesn't feel like you're being delivered a political message, but at the same time, walking out of the theater, you absolutely did get a message. I love when that happens. And it really does feel like you're in great hands throughout with Lily Gladstone in the lead. I can't understate how much of an impact she had on this film.
My number 4 is Infinity Pool. Even though I saw this in a theater, not at Sundance, this is not cheating. I would have seen it at Sundance if it wasn't coming out so soon, and my option was either wait for the theater or watch it on my stupid little TV. So I'm counting this, I don't care.
I have not seen the movie, just so we all know.
This was even better than Possessor. The reviews on this are good, but they're a little mixed. I don't understand why people aren't loving this more, honestly. The cinematography in this movie is great. I love the use of color. I love the off-kilter framing of the characters. I feel like there's always a really clear intention behind doing that. I love the score by Tim Hecker. And sure, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, the menu triangle of sadness, so many movies about like rich people being bad. And like, yeah, this is another one of those. However, I'm more interested in like the psychological angle of this movie, and I feel like people aren't talking about that enough. I think with this and Possessor, Brendan Cronenberg really has this fascination with like self-destruction. And everything in the movie felt very closely tied to our main character and what journey he is on. Alexander Skarsgård is great, but Mia Goth steals the show. I feel like this could be one of the best supporting performances of the entire year. She is just manic. It is such a memorable femme fatale type of character, and you could really put her in any horror movie you want at this point. This movie is also such a ride. It's totally unpredictable. I never knew where it was going, and I was like, I am just in for this movie. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great, and I might even see it again.
My number 3 is Beyond Utopia, a documentary about people seeking asylum from North Korea that you already talked about. It's hard to find another story where the characters feel like they're so close to being caught and to being killed, where they're really walking a fine line of life or death. And unlike 20 Days in Mariupol, this film has a little bit more of an uplifting message about human resilience. And it also is more grounded in 2 stories in particular about people who are trying to get out of the country or get their loved ones out of the country. It was also fascinating to see some of the characters look directly into the camera and tell you exactly what they think about the regime and how great they think it is. You really do get a comprehensive view of what is going on in North Korea, where it feels like there is no media coming out of there whatsoever, because basically there isn't. I already want this to win the Oscar for Best Documentary. I thought it was excellent. It's also very heart-wrenching. Like, it's really difficult to see all these people going through such hardship. There's some quote that I'm paraphrasing, but says that the human rights violations in North Korea are unparalleled but for Nazi Germany. Just a government that's so willing to execute its people if they violate basic rules. Some of the rules are so petty that it's almost laughable, but you know, you wouldn't be laughing if you got dumped in a wasteland and said, here, now you can survive on your own, with no recourse to get back to civilization. You just left to starve. I think everyone should see this very dark corner of the world and how it operates and how the people within it cope psychologically with being in the regime.
My number 3 is Joyland. I've been chasing this movie down ever since I missed it at Cannes. Also missed it at TIFF. You saw it at TIFF. You liked it a lot.
Yeah, I can't put it on my list here, but it was high up on my list of best of TIFF. I love this movie as well.
It's a Pakistani film about a guy who joins an erotic dance theater and starts working under this trans woman. And it's not just this main character. There are several characters around him who are restrained by the social expectations of their world. And this movie has a really, really great ensemble cast. Like, every single cast member gets a moment to shine. There are like 6 performances that are amazing here. The cinematography is also extremely beautiful. The lighting is so expressive. There were also some really powerful directing choices and shots where the director would hold on a composition and it would really sink into your brain. It's just everything about this film, from the crafts to the performances, the writing, the directing, was really, really strong. It was just a really compelling story about these people seeking individuality, and I think that the relationship between this guy and his wife was especially really fascinating because we both follow them on their separate journeys, but they don't really come together and like communicate so much what's going on, but we see the similarities in both of their experiences, and I feel like that was just a very powerful relationship, and I feel like I haven't seen anything quite like that.
My number 2 is Rye Lane, directed by Ray and Alan Miller, a filmmaker whose next project I just can't wait to see. I think the direction here had the most distinct voice I've seen from any film this year at Sundance. It was anything but subdued, but it just feels great to enjoy being in the hands of someone who is so adept with visual craftsmanship, and who's also creating a very unique tone and energy that sent me into a bit of euphoria by the end. And I was not expecting to experience this much joy from just a film, but my heart was just completely taken with this romance. And I think the filmmaking itself just made me fall in love with this movie. I really hope that this one doesn't coast under the radar and that when it comes out, people discover it.
March 31st on Hulu.
And I'm actually kind of surprised this didn't win Sundance. It feels like a film that would have won. We didn't even see the film that won the audience award.
We did not see the Persian version. We did not even see it.
It feels like this could have won. It was just such a knockout. But, you know, if you're looking for that Sundance movie, this felt like it was it. And everybody I talked to outside of the theater was buzzing as well.
You know, surprise, surprise, my number 2 is also Rye Lane. Watching this movie, I really felt that this filmmaker knows that anytime you ask people to watch your movie, you are asking for their time. And in this 82 minutes, there's not a minute where this movie is not just absolutely pumping with energy and color and life and style. It's both a romantic movie in that it's a romance, but it's also very romantic about life in general. The production design or the set decoration, it's so colorful and lively. There's so much creativity in this movie. This filmmaker went the extra mile to make sure that every scene is visually interesting, and she's putting in little details in the background that are fun to catch. And you know, when these characters are like telling their backstories, those are highly stylized and they're like on a stage. There's just a lot of stimulation in this movie. There was no movie at Sundance that stimulated me more. There are 2 really wonderful lead performances in here. The movie is just really wonderful, funny, joyous, and I cannot recommend it enough.
My number 1, which is probably most people's number 1s who are in person since the virtual people did not get to see it, it's Past Lives. And we're going to hear a lot about this film for the rest of the year. It's the only film where I'm not really worried about the visibility. I just think this will catch fire very nicely. It's got A24 behind it, and I think there's gotta be an Oscar campaign here. I wasn't quite as invested in the first half, and I know that people's expectations will be very high for this one, but just know that by the end, you will probably be very moved. I think it'd be very hard to walk out of this film not feeling something. It's really a story I haven't seen before, and it feels like it's about something that I haven't seen a film be about in as special of a way. And it was extremely soul-stirring to watch the characters deal with situations where there aren't any easy answers. And the 3 lead performances in this, I think, are excellent. I don't even want to say too much because I can tell you're already sold. You're looking at the Letterboxd score and you're going, okay, that's going to have like at least a 4.2, and you're right, it's probably going to have like a 4.3. It had my whole theater crying by the end.
We were at different points of the theater, and I can also attest to this. I was in the back, you were like in the middle.
If you see like 5 movies this year, this has got to be one of them. I don't even like hyping up movies to this extent because people expect to be like blown away when they walk in the theater, and I'll just say, like, I wouldn't hype it up if I didn't really think there's a decent chance you will feel like that by the end.
I heard this movie was really, really good since like the summer when it test screened, and I heard a couple people who attended it, they were like, this is fucking good. And I was like, okay, I hope it's at Sundance. And then everybody saw it at Sundance like 2 days before me, and they were raving about it, and then I saw it and I was like, okay, hello everybody, I've joined the party. This is also my number 1. This is a future classic. Let's just say it's a future classic. It's a Letterboxd classic at minimum, okay? A film Twitter classic.
Yeah, kind of like Call Me By Your Name.
Yes.
People are just going to be tweeting the shit out of it, being like, oh my god, Past Lives wrecked me.
But also just the way that, like, Call Me By Your Name, the final shot, the way that it sunk in while I was watching that, and it was unforgettable. That's how I felt about the last, like, 5 minutes of this movie. Like, it was unforgettable. That's why it's a classic, because, like, that moment is just pure cinema, and there's nothing like it. I agree with everything you said. The performances are great. The writing is great. There are some really strong directing and visual choices in here. You know, what more can you say other than the movie kind of wrecked me?
I haven't so easily been like, that's a 10 for a movie. Even Everything Everywhere, I watched it twice. After Sun, I watched it twice. Rye Lane, I'm still like, okay, it's like a 9.5. This is like easy 10.
It has a 95 on Metacritic. I understand people being maybe skeptical about the awards prospects because the director's new, the cast is, you know, mostly not too well known.
It's also subdued.
All I can say is that just people are just not going to forget about this movie, nor will they shut up about it. So how could it not, you know, be in the conversation for year ends, you know, best of, and then, you know, the awards go from there. I think that's going to happen. But yeah, that was the movie of Sundance for anybody who actually did get to see it. And those are our top 10s of Sundance 2023.
You should put these movies on your Letterboxd list, and you know, you should go and follow him and subscribe on Patreon, because you'd be supporting someone who you like, whose content you watch, and you like him.
We just reviewed The Wolf of Wall Street. We're reviewing stuff every month.
You basically pay him to have less of a job. Like, the more money that you give him to do this, the less of a job he can have, more of a job he can do of this, which is a job.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
Can you count to 10?